The first speaker is Dr. Patrick McCullough. He's a professor with the Department of Crop and Soil Science. He is a accomplished weed scientist working in Turfgrass system primarily. Patrick, your floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Shamat. My presentation showing up okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us. My name is Patrick McCullough, and I will be presenting a 12-minute brief update on kind of what's new in the world of weed control for turfgrass managers. And one of the potential big changes that we see coming in the next year or two is restrictions on the pre-emergent herbicide Ronstar. The active ingredient oxadiazone is up for EPA registration review. And recently there has been concerns addressed by the EPA about the chronic health risks that labeled uses of Ronstar may pose to people that could come into contact with Ronstar residues. There's also concerns over drinking water contamination from the use of this herbicide. And we see label changes coming either next year or in 2024. And that's going to significantly impact how much Ronstar we can use and where we can use it in certain turfgrass areas. Ronstar will likely have a restricted use pesticide labeling. So that's going to be important for not only purchasing the product, but record keeping and storage of the product as well. And all of the label changes for use areas will have a must water in statement the day of treatments for Ronstar uses. One of the biggest impacts that we see with the new restrictions with Ronstar is the total acreage for golf course superintendents and golf course uses with this product. Many golf courses, especially in the South, go wall to wall with Ronstar in the spring and in the summertime. With these new proposed restrictions, we will be limited to 30% of the total acreage of a golf course that can be treated with Ronstar. This does give flexibility on where the 30% is treated. The first proposals from the EPA that were introduced limited to just fairways only. But now it's 30% of any part of that golf course can be treated with Ronstar with a 60-day retreatment interval. Also, the application rates, there's going to be some language on those labels about how much you can apply per application, depending on which formulation is being used. And there's only going to be a single liquid application of 2 pounds AI per acre that can be used per year. There's not big restrictions about how much we can use or rates that we typically use for controlling weeds like crab and goosegrass, but that percent of the total acreage is really going to impact golf course weed management strategies. Ronstar is also a very popular pre-emergent herbicide for sod because it's so safe in areas that are going to be harvested for sod and areas that are regrowing from ribbons, because the pre-emergence effects don't affect roots of grasses that come into contact with a Ronstar treatment. But no restrictions on time of year, 60-day retreatment intervals, and the application rates will be limited to 6 pounds active per acre per year. That's a reduction from 8 pounds per acre per year total that we currently have on that Ronstar label. And 2 liquid applications per year on sod farms, but not on other turf sites. One of the other impacts is going to be on athletic fields. There's a lot of oxadiazone products used on sports turf because it's so easy on the lateral growth of grasses like Bermuda grass and the recovery from stress and from wear and tear. But we will see total applications, again, restricted to 6 pounds AI per acre per year. And we must water in treatments immediately after treatments. And likely it will be only the granular formulation that will be permitted on sports fields. There will be further evaluations by the EPA with oxadiazone. We will keep you updated on this issue. They're going to continue to evaluate post-application risk from turf exposure to oxadiazone treatments. And also there's ongoing residue studies to help quantify the exposure following Ronstar treatments with and without irrigation and various other factors. This is a pretty significant restriction on pre-emergent weed control programs for many reasons for us in turf. And we are going to have to likely come up with new management strategies for some of those turf managers that have relied on Ronstar uses over the years. Ronstar has been very effective for problem weeds like goosegrass. It has very good turfgrass safety, and it's widely used during turfgrass establishment. So those are all going to be impacted by the restrictions on Ronstar use, especially for sod and in sports turf. But the mode of action, anytime we have a restriction on a herbicide that's so effective on weeds like goosegrass, it does raise concerns over future resistance issues from some of the other chemistries that we will have to rely on there in the future. Some of the potential limitations, these are all pre-emergent herbicides that we've done work with that could be Ronstar replacements or used in sequential programs with limited Ronstar use. There will be a new SureGuard product labeled and sold on a fertilizer carrier either later this year or sometime next year. SureGuard is a sprayable formulation at the moment for use in turf, but it's limited to dormant applications only, much like sprayable Ronstar products. So putting it on a fertilizer carrier safens it to green grass. You can use it during active growth. We've seen very good tolerance with SureGuard. And because it has the same mode of action as Ronstar, it could have a similar fit in the turfgrass industry to the way turf managers have been using Ronstar over the years. And then some of the other chemistries, Tower and Pennant, these pick up similar weeds to Ronstar, but they have very limited residual activity. They may last about 6 weeks in the soil before you have to reapply them. Spectacle Flow is very good for controlling weeds like goosegrass in the spring, similar to Ronstar. It's also very good for Poa annua, but it's a completely different mode of action, and it's potentially injurious to shallow-rooted turf grasses, and we have much more risk to turfgrass safety using Spectacle compared to Ronstar. We also have some new restrictions on triazine herbicides. This is something that has hit the industry over the last year, and this will impact atrazine and simazine products for use in turfgrass. There's been some voluntary changes by the companies that are labeling atrazine and simazine for turfgrass based on the EPA's review of the safety of these products, especially to residential turf grasses. But there's going to be some new language with roadside uses and also nozzles that are going to be recommended for spraying herbicide like atrazine. But really, residential turf has been impacted the most. Sprayable formulations, we are now capped at 1 pound active ingredient per acre per application. Granular formulations have also been reduced for single application rates, not to the extent of the sprayable formulations, but a slight reduction there. So they are trying to minimize surface water contamination, groundwater contamination because of the mobility of the atrazine when it's applied in lawns and residential settings. There's no changes to atrazine in sports turf and golf courses. Simazine has also been impacted. There's going to be some language differences on the newer labels about nozzles, wind speeds, and temperatures. But for home lawns, residential turf, and also sports fields, the single maximum use rate has been reduced. And there's going to be some directions on the label about whether or not you can irrigate will determine how much herbicide you can apply. Without irrigation in these areas, the maximum single application rate is 0.65 pounds active ingredient per acre. So that's a significant drop from the 1 to 2 pounds AI per acre that many turf managers will use when spraying simazine. And of course, this is a concern for us. Simazine is very cheap, but it's also a good tool to have for fighting resistance, for managing multiple weeds and warm season grasses. And if you're capped at very low use rates, such as 0.65 pounds AI per acre, it may not be sufficient to control weeds that are present in lawns and sports turf. So switching up to problem weeds here, fall is a great time of year to be targeting perennial weeds such as yellow nut sedge and some of the perennial sedges with post-emergent herbicide applications. Fall is a great time of year to consider renovation. Warm season grasses like Bermuda grass, we get much better movement, much better translocation of those herbicides from the leaves to the below ground plant parts. For sedges in particular, we can use sulfonylurea herbicides and we get better kill of what's going on below ground. The tubers, the nutlets, we get the best long-term control of sedges with a September, October application. We still have sufficient temperatures and we get great kill of weeds like the sedges, but also Dallas grass, Basie grass, and some of the other warm season perennial grasses. With using sulfonylurea herbicides, it's important to have a surfactant with them. Do not mow for several days. And tank mixtures is something that we've been recommending here lately because of what we've been seeing with the onset of resistance to group 2 herbicides, such as sulfonylureas in sedges. Here's a look at a field that was treated with sedge hammer halosulfuron, and you can see all the controlled yellow nut sedge surrounding many of these annual sedge plants that are green and healthy and actively growing. And we have identified multiple populations of sulfonylurea resistant sedge in Georgia. We have annual sedge. There's also been yellow nut sedge detected in row crops. And this is just an emerging issue here where we're seeing target site resistance with some of the sedges where we are controlling these susceptible biotypes. And you can see here that resistant biotype in the background, not controlled by a 20x rate of the labeled uses of the sedge hammer product. And they're growing right through it like they weren't even sprayed at all. Some of the other ALS resistant sedges that we are seeing in turf and also some of the row crops include both perennial and some of the annual sedge species. This is something that to just keep on your radar, that if you're seeing sulfonylurea treatments starting to control other weeds, but you have some sedges that may be dying and may be surviving at the same time, that there could be a potential to have some of that resistant sedge popping up in your turf. We've also seen ALS-resistant green Kalinga. There's a lot of Kalinga now spreading in lawns, golf, sod farms, sports turf as well. Green Kalinga is a perennial that's spreading from below-ground plant parts, and it's also producing a lot of viable seed with the seed head production. And we come in and mow those areas, and we are spreading seed. And in this case, what we have identified is sulfonylurea-resistant green Kalinga that is not controlled by, here again, 30x rates of products like Certainty. This green Kalinga in particular was resistant to all ALS inhibitors that we tested. And this is a concern for us. We're looking at alternative herbicides to sulfonylureas for controlling Kalinga and sedges. Dismiss NXT. These are popular for controlling sedges and Kalinga in the summertime. But having that second mode of action of a dismiss, Basagrin, or in some cases, if you can still use MSMA, those all make very good tank mix partners with sulfonylureas to control resistant plants. And then pre-emergent herbicides can also be effective for controlling sedges. How much time do I have, Shamat?
You basically have 1 minute max.
1 minute. All right. Very good. Just to wrap things up here, in the theme of herbicide resistance, many of these herbicides that we use in turfgrass have a single site of action. And if there's any change, any alteration in that target site, most of these herbicides have potential to fail to control weed biotypes with that altered target site. And with the classic case now is POA annua. We're seeing lots of POA that is resistant to one or more modes of action in a single use site, in a single turf site. And this is all because of that altered target site that prevents that POA from responding to single sites of action herbicide. So what we are recommending is be proactive with your POA control strategies. Use tank mixtures early in the life cycle of POA annua, especially in the fall. We have seen mid-November to about early December timing some of these programs in warm season grasses using products like Revolver and Simazine that offer 2 different modes of action, can control young POA when it's most susceptible. And you've got 2 modes of action present that can help control any resistant biotypes that may be present in that turf. Also, using these combinations with pre-emergent herbicides will also help extend that residual control. So once you do control the seedlings, you can prevent new POA that's going to establish during that peak germination period through about December to January or so. And with that, I will wrap things up, Shamat. Thank you very much. Should we hold questions?
Yeah, just hang on. I would say,
Okay.
as we get more questions towards the end, we'll hang you. Okay, if you can, yes. Okay, so let's switch gears to entomology. So my name is Shamat Joseph, and I'm with the Department of Entomology. My responsibilities are with turfgrass and also ornamentals. So today I thought I would just go over Polonium and Bermuda grass mite. This year it's not a Polonium year. It's good. Last year was. So I thought maybe there's a couple of pointers that I just want to make sure that you understand about their biology, about Polonium and Bermuda grass. In general, I'm seeing that kind of emerging, and I'm hearing few questions from people querying about this. So I thought just to go over very quickly on these two pests. Okay. So for armyworm, we think first thing to look for is ID, right? You want to make sure you have the right species. So if you look at the head capsule, you will see this inverted Y shape. And if you see that this particular Y shape sign there, it is more likely to be an armyworm, and more likely it's going to be a full armyworm if it is a turfgrass. So just to test base on its life cycle, the moths basically fly this time of the year. We start seeing anytime the growing season, we should start seeing them. But we see as a problem starting late July in a typical year. And the females basically live up to 21 days and they start laying eggs. So the eggs are basically fussier, brownish, cottony in appearance. They can lay up to 50 to 100 eggs. And after that, eggs hatch, they go through 6 instars, young larvae, and that's the more damaging stage. And they pupate in the soil and they emerge out. So whole cycle in the summertime can be completed in a month. In 30 days, we can complete it with the temperature that we got here. So another important point I want to mention here is that in Georgia, they don't all winter, or they all die off, in other words, in Georgia. So that is very important to understand about this Polonium, because there's a notion that now this is around and they come back kind of residential. That's not true. They won't all winter, they all die. So every year we start from zero. They're all flying from two populations that we might get. One for sure is in the southern Florida area. I would say south of Orlando and regions like that. And other population is in Texas, south of Texas. And they, every year they fly in. And the moths fly, they get sucked up by the air currents or the weather movements. So early storms, that's something that we need to watch. So early storms and more events like that will bring more moths into this region. And they start feeding and they go through multiple generations and become visible. So we start seeing them. So it's more like a sporadic pest. Last year you had it. There's no guarantee this year you're going to have it. Okay. So that's an important thing to remember about Polonium. And damage is like any other grass insect pest. They all start with their small spotted, initial small spots, and eventually those spots coalesces into a bigger patch, and you start noticing. And there should be a pattern. Usually you see them around a fenced area or something like that. Any kind of structure, the lawn, that's where you start seeing these brown patches appearing. So there is a reason for that, because they lay eggs in a structure around the grass. Like we have a shade or a fence or a pole sticking, a flag sticking, whatever that may be. They like to lay eggs very close to the turf grass on any structure that is close by. And eggs hatch, and like I said, and all this activity happens in the night, so you may not see them outright. And the first stars, they are very small that you may not see it until it becomes like third to fourth, 15th star. They're bigger size, and maybe that time management is going to be tricky because they're big by itself. It's difficult to manage. So what you look for is egg mass. That's what you need to look for. And if the numbers are very high, you need to make sure that you can do an application. It doesn't have to be an entire loan application. It can be more like a banded application around the structure, whatever you're seeing a lot of egg masses. And that basically you're killing the young larvae and we are basically stopping the population. Again, the question is whether the grass will recover. Most of the situations where we are seeing moderate population, the grass will recover up to 3 or sometimes 4 weeks. It will come back. It is a kind of a brown, a temporary thing, and the grass will come back. Unless the population is very high, that the caterpillars start eating the stolon, that's a different story. That case, you might need to think about resorting. Management of this pest, if we can do it early, you have a lot of options out there, especially BP products like Bacillus thuringiensis, Kostaki, with the strain that we use. And that really works as long as you treat and get the young instars. If it is a bigger one, the BP, all those products will not work. That applies to any product in general. If it is a 4 to 15 stars, it's not going to work. The efficacy is going to go down. So how you see whether the insecticide will work, you can do a soap flush kind of thing. Put some soap and you drench it and see what comes out. And after the application, you can monitor that way if the population is going down or not. Let me switch gears into another pest that it's not really widespread, it's not really damaging or destructive in a sense, but it's over time builds up. So this is Bermuda grass mite. This mite is so tiny that you can see it with your naked eye. You need a microscope to see it. It is very minute, and all you see is the symptom. It's roseate appearance on the grass, as you can see over here. It's more like a virus infected symptom that look more like roseate, bunchy topped appearances. Very weird growth of grass. So we got it, which is blue, and stunting is also very common. In general stunting, we have this infestation. So when you realize that you got it is when you start seeing some thinning going on in certain spots. So you might see like certain spots, you see a thinning occurring. It's not very widespread across the lawn. You may not see that. Any area of the lawn or the golf course, wherever that may be, where you see a stressed area, that's where this problem starts. So in the case of golf course can be on the bunkers where there's water stress and things like that, that's when they might grow and the population goes very high and start seeing. One thing we notice is that if they're feeding and causing damage, the next year, nothing will grow out of those stones. So basically they're killing the stone the following year. And that's how it's more like a protracted, accumulates with year, it becomes worse and worse if you don't intervene. So there's no virus involved. That is very important to notice. So symptoms appear like a virus symptom, but it's not nothing that we know of that's related to virus. And the spots, just like for Armyworm here, the spots can coalesce together and become like a big patch. We don't have any threshold for this because first of all, it's very small. And another reason is that it's not necessary you should see a mite all the time. Because what we know is that the mite numbers basically spike in the fall and also in the spring. So this fall time around October, when it is cooler, that's the time you start seeing the mite numbers go up. But the symptom, that will be persistent throughout the year. So you will see the symptoms throughout the year, but the mites not necessarily that you should have high numbers. They're still there, but they're very low numbers. So that is a main problem with management. Any applications you make, it's going to be tricky because the coverage is really a problem here because they like to stay within the sheath, the leaf sheath and feed there, and you may not be able to get into the sites and get a contact. So there are complete studies out there saying some grasses are resistant and others are not and stuff like that, but there is no consistent data across the board from all the studies combined if you look at that. So we say that some of the cultivars are resistant based on some studies. So what we can do on this management is a key in terms of more like cultural management, that's the emphasis here, rather than chemical. So because of coverage issues, it's very difficult to go that route. So moist stress is something that you need to look if there is any areas it's poorly irrigated or it is up in the elevated or uphill or something like that. Those spots needs water. That's one way to reduce the stress. Another important aspect which you got to Bermuda grass mite management is the removal of clippings. Because if you don't remove the clippings, you're basically spreading it within your own yard. So if you suspect that it is a Bermuda grass mite problem, you have to haul it out from it and don't put it back there. So that's one important thing to remember. And manage optimum height. The taller the grass, that's not good. Means we're creating more conditions for mites to grow and flourish. We also know that if you put a lot of nitrogen fertilizer, it is not good. So excessive nitrogen is not good. It's really not good for mite population. They'll just go and explode. So you have to watch that also. It's not a good idea to do that if you have a plumberry grass mite problem. And like I said, there are insecticides, McCullough, they're active against mites. And again, if you have any products that is a combination of pyrethroid and neonicotinoids, it should have a better luck on controlling and giving some knockdown if you apply it right time. If you apply in the summertime, the mites are very low already. So you're wasting your money, in other words. Okay, that's all I got here. And let me move on for the sake of time. If you have questions, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. Okay. Let me share. Okay, our next speaker, he is Dr. Alfredo Martínez, and he's a professor and extension plant pathologist with Department of Plant Pathology. And he is involved in many crops, including turfgrass, small grain, non-legume forages. But I believe he's working a lot more on turfgrass. So Dr. Martínez, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shamat. Let's start. Okay, we're going to be talking about Turfgrass diseases in the update. Basically, what I wanted to point out is that diseases and fall is very important in terms of preventing or preventive management, either cultural and chemical. But I wanted to go a little bit on disease. It's a little bit more complicated than I think than weeds and insects, in the sense that it's a very weather-based issue, and everything that we do are going to be pretty much dependent on weather and some issues that, for example, happen and sometimes we forget about it, and that actually have an impact on diseases. For example, this year, March 6, they were record highs in about 100 cities. And then the same week, at least in Georgia, we had a frost. And so all those variations had an impact on disease, on turfgrass stress, and so on. Social grass, for example, here in Georgia, we received, I think, the largest number of samples that I have had in many years due to these issues and so on. So again, if you're going to be talking about disease, it's going to be weather warriors. Here's just an illustration of the more susceptible times that we have here, again, in disease, especially I'm talking about most specifically on worms on grasses, in which the fall is the time that it's really important for disease management and prevention. And we have to take advantage of that, because sometimes, and especially we see disease in the springtime, many answers is you should have done something in the fall, in early October or so, like here in Georgia, or to early November. So that's frustrating in many cases. And so if nothing from this 15 minutes is that this is the time to implement preventative measures for dollar spot, Bipolaris leaf spot, Rhizoctonia large patch, and spring death spot, or all of them, of course, in warm season grasses. And we're going to go through some of those measures, because really, for example, for rice and spring death spot, fall is one of the most important times that we need to do some preventative measures. You can have a little more leeway time in dollar spot and Bipolaris leaf spot, but this is really important. Foliar diseases, just to illustrate dollar spot, we've seen the symptoms, and what I wanted really to take home message is that a lot of dollar spot can overwinter in the thatch and some other parts, and they're just waiting for the right conditions to develop. And this is just a few more symptoms on low, higher cut grass. Is on bent grass, but you will see that in Bermuda grass, and it may not be as obvious in a higher cut, but you will see that. And you will, by the time that you see that little patch, you will see a lot of lesions underneath. That is very conclusive of dollar spot. So what is the thing going on right now. And I just wanted to point that out that this year I've seen dollar spot basically all year, all throughout the summer. Sometimes we see it, or in most of the typical years, in the springtime and then the fall time. This year has been going on all over the year, and that's due to the humidity that we have had here, at least in the southeast in Georgia. But if nothing from this, dollar spot is a low fertility disease. So again, this time, of course, it will be kind of in the tail end of the nitrogen applications, but we see that also low potassium levels can bring up the disease. So again, this is the time to address some potassium levels and so on, of course, and manage the humidity on the disease. Because I just went to some of my plots, and the disease is been going on, but is ready to explode once again. We have nighttime temperatures on the upper 50s, and that combined with daytime temperatures in 80s, mid 80s, that's a perfect environment for the disease development of dollar spot. Due to the importance of the disease, we have a lot of fungicides that are good for it, and this time, again, the time to do it. Some of the carboxamides, something like that contains iprodion, some that contains vinclozolin, for example, that are very good against the dollar spot. Some of the DMI, the dimethyl inhibitors, anything that has a azole at the end, like methylfluconazole, propiconazole, tebuconazole, triticonazole, and some that don't look like a DMI, but it's like Bileton or, trimethoprim, which is Bileton, and so on, are very efficacious against dollar spot. And the newer products, such as the succinate dehydrogenase inhibitors, something like boscalid, like floxapyroxide, that is Exemplar, Cabuto, and some other Valista, also are very good products. Now, just to want to mention that the strobilurins are really not efficacious, or the efficacy is very low. Dollar spot has a natural resistance to the disease. So very important what you're dealing with, because we're going to see the next disease in which it's a little bit, when a lot of the strobilurins is very efficacious. And that's Bipolaris leaf spot and crown rot. And again, the previous disease, you can find it in any really warm season grass, especially highly susceptible seashore paspalum, Bermuda grass, zoysia grass. I just went this morning to one of my plots, and some of the zoysia grass parts actually have a toro exploding with the disease. But this particular disease, bipolar leaf spot, only on Bermuda grass, and the disease a little bit different, in which it has a lot of little spots, black looking on the blades, and the distribution is just very irregular and so on. And that's due to the spores that can be really moved easily through water, through just walking, mowing, things like that. So that's why the patterns that we have in diseases really is very important to address the potassium levels. Most of the time that I've seen a bipolar leaf spot issue, the potassium levels in the soil are low. So that's one of the things that are very that you have to address right from the get-go. So again, a good timing. I like to add or play a little bit with potassium at this time of the year for many different several different diseases. Any stress, any things like heavy mowing or high kind of big mowers, things like that, will pack the soil and actually can promote the disease. Of course, of fertility, especially in phosphorus and potassium levels. And of course, irrigation or water management is really important for this disease. Some of this that we see here, some examples on that could be. But again, you guys have probably your county agents all over in the several states that can help you out to determine what if disease do you have. And the issue is because the fungicides like iprodion and mancozeb are really good against the disease, and also the strobilurins. So in this one, contrary to dollar spot, the strobilurins are very efficacious against the disease. And we have tested several on that, and the list and some of also the SDHIs that we have tested are very efficacious. So again, this is the time to do, if you have had a history of a bit bipolar leaf spot in your area that you're managing, this is the time to do a preventative application, because if not, you're doing curative, you're just going to be battling against the current. But one of the most important part is actually on crown and sheath diseases. And on that, we have Rhizoctonia large patch, which it's a soil inhabitant. And if you have zoysia grass, if you have any really warm season grass, Rhizoctonia is typically, they go together. And fall, especially around September, October, is when we start seeing it. I went this morning to some of my plots, and I can see some on the onset on some of my San Agustin grass areas. So it's coming. And this is the time to implement some measure on that. Some symptoms that you see here, to make a little bit of a caveat that the disease does not attack the root system and doesn't really go on the top, on the foliage, but in the crown area, at least the large patch on one season grasses. And that's why you see all this rebound in the middle and things like that, contrary to what we're going to see, hopefully, spring the spot. This is on El Toro. Some of my plots, really large areas. It can get up to 6 or 7 foot in diameter. Very in centipede, you can see very strong margins on it. This is where disease is progressing outwards on that. And here, for example, where areas in your area, landscape or things like that actually have a little bit more of shade, that's when you start seeing them first. Early detection is key. So basically a preventative application, and we are at the right time right now to implement some of that. We're going to be talking about some fungicide, but really addressing any water management, any water issue that you have there. It thrives on thatchy areas and wet. So that this is very important. That's something we need to do. We have 2-3 pages of fungicides for large patch in our pest management handbook. That is Gary. I'm coming, Shamat. But basically in this one, the strobilurin, the DMIs, and the carboxamides or the SDH are very efficacious. The thing that I wanted to basically is that fall is the best timing right now, and also the gallonage. It needs to be at the deposit of the crown level, which basically is, we use 3 to 4 gallons per 1,000 square feet. So with that done, I will be here for some questions, but remember, fall is the time for that and for spring spot management.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martinez. Our next speaker is Dr. Clint Waltz. He is an extension specialist with the UGA. His responsibility is Turfgrass. He's with the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'm just going to tell you, this technology thing is absolutely stunning because I'm coming to you today from Portland, Oregon. I'm out here for a couple of meetings, one of which is actually seeing seed production fields where 90% of the cool season grasses are produced is here just south of Portland. And I'm getting to see this for the first time in my professional career, where tall fescue and ryegrass and Kentucky bluegrass and bentgrass seed are produced. One of the things I want to talk about as we're going into the fall of the year is the best defense is a good offense. It is football season out there. So using a little bit of the football terminology out there, the best defense is a good offense. And here what we want to do is make sure we're doing all the right practices to grow our grass as best as we can, to do all the right agronomic things to grow grass is our good offense. And hopefully that's going to prevent some of the problems that the former speakers have spoke about. Weeds, insects, and diseases. If we've got good grass, we're going to have fewer weeds, fewer insects, and fewer disease issues. And some of this certainly starts back with 2 big things that in turf we do. One is fertility, and the other is some of our cultivation and cultural practices like mowing. And we're going to talk about some of these, and not necessarily in this order. You've in the business, turfgrass adage is if you grow grass, you mow grass. It's just the way it's going to be. And this year, certainly the weather we've had, especially in July, August, and now early September, grass, warm season and cool season species have both been growing very well. And we've kept the mowers moving well. 1/3 mowing rule. I would think most of you are very familiar with the 1/3 mowing rule, where we don't remove any more than 1/3 of the leaf surface or leaf canopy in one single cutting or mowing out there. So as a result, we're going to talk about cutting heights or mowing heights here in just a minute on those. But they're worked around this 1/3 mowing rule because mowing is a stress. So we want to wind up reducing the amount of stress that we wind up putting on the turf system with routine mowing as best we can. And believe it or not, this is something that's been in the turf world for quite some time. We've been teaching it for a long time. But if you go back and plow into the research and the literature, this 1/3 mowing rule is really not well based on a lot of good science and research, but it is based on some good plant stress and trying to minimize stress on the plant such that we wind up maintaining a healthy, active turf out there on the things. So I want to talk a little bit about our mowing heights. This slide here is set up for our warm season grasses, long grasses. So St. Augustine grass should be mowed somewhere probably around 2.5, 3 inches is what we need to be in the state of Georgia, is right around that. I know you get south of the border down there, when I'm talking Florida, probably somewhere closer to 3.5 to 4. I see a lot of that, as well as some recommendations down there. But for us in Georgia, whether you're on the coast or surprising the amount of St. Augustine grass that you'll find in the Atlanta area, 2.5, 3 inches year round is a pretty good spot to be for St. Augustine. Centipede, 1.5 to 2 inches. 1.5 is a really good place to be for centipede grass. There is some old literature out there, certainly some old recommendations that have centipede up closer to 3 inches. I'll tell you that work that I've done earlier in my career, the higher the mowing height, the more likely we're going to lose grass in the spring, especially if we have that late Easter freeze that's not uncommon. So keeping centipede mowed down about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, somewhere in that range, we have less of that opportunity. Doesn't mean we can't get cold enough and we wouldn't, but less so of it. And then Bermuda grass and zoysia grass, and I was talking with someone the other day that they just really looked at me funny when I said zoysia grass should be maintained right around 1.5 inches for residential lawns. And yes, I understand zoysia grass can get thick, it can be difficult to push a mower through, it can get difficult to drive a mower through. But the reality is it needs to be mowed right around 1.5 inches. You keep it up too high, that canopy never dries out. We start running into some of Dr. Martinez's disease issues on things. So these mowing heights that we have listed right there are ones that through years, through observations, through science, that are the ideal range and an appropriate range. The other is, if you look at this slide, you'll notice that the root system, the deeper you go or the taller you go, the deeper the roots go. And there is a relationship between height and depth of roots. Don't let this slide mislead you. For each one of those species that I have listed and the mowing height that we have recommended, is where we're trying to optimize that rooting depth as well as maintain turf grass quality. After all, in turf, we are in a quality business. It has to look good, it has to function, it has to perform on it. So we want to wind up growing as deeper roots as possible. Deep roots allow us to explore more soil volume for water and nutrients. Deep roots allow us to get from one rainfall event to the next, even if there's maybe a period in there of 5, 7, 10, 14 days without any rainfall. Deeper roots allow us to pull water and nutrients from a greater depth and hopefully get from one rainfall event to the next without losing turf grass quality. The next slide here, very similar, only this is our cool season species. So there's tall fescue. We are coming into the growing season for tall fescue in Georgia and throughout the southeastern U.S. And as a result, we can start lowering our mowing heights. Typically there, we want to, through the summertime, we generally want to be somewhere right around 3.5 inches or so for tall fescue. Kentucky bluegrass for us here in the southeast, where we do have it on it. But as we move into the growing season, we can bring that mowing height down, say around 2.5 inches, 2 inches or so, if you really want to stripe it up, make it look good and pretty. Thing here is you have to remember is we're trying to grow those roots before we get to stress periods, which would mean next April, late March, early to mid-April. So I'm going to start bringing that mowing height back up to grow those roots. You can't wait till you get to your stress times. So you can't wait till May or June, whenever it's getting hot, and then bring your mowing height up and expect to grow roots. You got to do it well in advance. So if you bring that mowing height down to make tall fescue really look good, say in October, November, December, January, February, sometime in March or April, start bringing that mowing height back up, growing roots as deep as you can in preparation for stress periods, being heat stress in next late spring and summer. new wave of things that we're seeing. They've been out there on the market now for probably about 4 to 5 years, or some of these robotic or automated mowers. There's several manufacturers out there. Husqvarna is certainly one of them. Steel, I know, has one out there. I've seen John Deere with a prototype. I'm not sure that was actually on the commercial. There's, Echo, I think, has had one more on the professional side. And Works, WRX, is the other one I've seen, especially for residential on these. There are huge labor savings. And the number one issue we have in turf, whether it's commercial lawn care, whether it's golf course, sports fields, sod production, is labor. We are an outside industry. We are one that has a hard time finding people to do it. Labor. Landscape companies I'm aware of taking two different business models on these. Some where the homeowner owns it, the other where the landscaper actually owns it, leases it out. They have a fleet per se. And then it takes a 3-man or a 2-man truck down to a 2 or a 1-man type of truck on these. So they don't have to mow. They show up, they weed eat, they edge, they clean up, they straighten up, and then the mower's just doing its thing on it. They operate rain or shine 24/7. They don't know when the 4th of July is. And as I tell a lot of folks too, I've never had the ones that we've worked with on campus and sort of research trials. I've yet to have one call in late. I've yet to have one call in with a case of brow bottle flu on it. So they're very reliable. They're only getting better as far as the technology. The ones we've worked with have a boundary wire placed in. I know these companies are heading towards now more of a GPS and geofencing them that way. So the technology is only getting better, but the quality of cut is incredible on these. And we've done some research in what we've saw. If you were at our field day this past year, I had this as one of our field day stops. We're actually seeing improved turf density and rooting depth and density as well as a result of maintaining the proper mowing height, removing no more than 1/3 of that that leaf surface, and just imposing less stress on the turf. So it's not being stressed with what I can call conventional mowing, where it grows up, say, over the course of 7, 8, 10 days, and then gets mowed back down on it. So always being continuously mowed, always having that fine mowed look to it. The other part is if you look at the blade themselves, the blade on these robotic mowers is about the size of a utility knife, whereas a conventional mower is much thicker, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times thicker than the blade on these. So it's a much better cut, a cleaner cut for that leaf, and it's less stress on it. As a result, the plant does respond to it. I got ahead of myself a little bit right here. If you look on here, this is the cutting head. There's little blades back up under each one of those little small holes. But what I'm really trying to point out here is just the size of the clippings. So very few clippings. They're very small. Some of it gets worked back into in the turfgrass stand. And because they're small and fine, the microbial breakdown on them is much more rapid and complete as well. So returning nutrients back is a plus. And that's maybe another layer of research to be done is, can we reduce the amount of nitrogen fertilization being put out there because we're returning these clippings? They're getting broke back down, and those nutrients are being more efficiently returned back to the system and recycled. But leading into that, the next thing I want to talk about is fertility as we're moving here into the fall of the year, because warm seasons and cool seasons are a little different. But our 4 R's of nutrient stewardship, right time. So when we put nutrients out, whenever the grass is actively growing, can take it up. Put it out in the right place. For us in turf, that can either be soil applied through our normal granular applications, or many of our commercial lawn care folks, as well as our golf course superintendents out there, are going at light rates, but foliar feed kind of options on those. So in turf, we can do it both. That's not always the case with all crops, but for us in turf, we can go soil or foliar. Putting out the right rate. We want to make sure we put out the amount that the plant needs. We're not overstimulating the system on it. So being the right rate, or point where we're putting out so much that the plant can't take it up and it's leaching past the root system and moving into groundwater issues and creating environmental problems. And in the right source, using the right types of fertilizer. We'll talk about that briefly here in a minute too. The reasons that we fertilize are for color. Turf is meant to be green. Growth and recovery. People use our plant. They're out there on it. This is the time of year, like I said, it's football season, but it's also the time of year there's a lot of children are using our park and rec facilities on those recovery and growth and that type of thing, and replacing nutrients as they become unavailable to the plant. You're going to buy fertilizer. You're spending money. You're putting it out for a client or for yourself. You expect that fertilizer, that nutrient, nitrogen, magnesium, phosphorus, calcium, iron, potassium, whatever, to be taken up by the roots, assimilated into the plant, and then turn it into new shoots, new roots, new rhizomes, new stolons, new leaf material. So that's what those nutrients go back into, is being assimilated in the plant and being used by the plant to grow more. You want that. If you're going to spend money for it, the plant may as well get it and use it as you're intended for it to be done out there. Right now, you may see, especially go out and look at any of your big box retail, a lot of winterizer type things are coming out. So for our warm season species, Bermuda grass, centipede, St. Augustine grass, zoysia grass, winterizer type fertilizers really aren't needed, even at these low nitrogen rates. I've done the math there that some of these will range anywhere from 0.6 to 0.8 of a pound per 1,000 square foot of nitrogen. This time of year, we just really don't need that kind of nitrogen. Let those grasses harden off, those warm season species harden off. Despite what the name is on the fertilizer or the time of year, we really won't be looking for a winterizer or winter guard or those kinds of things for warm season species, wrong time of the year. As Dr. Martinez mentioned, if there is anything to go out on our warm season grasses right now, potassium would be the one we would want to think about. It's our health element, as we refer to it. It promotes rooting, stress preconditioning. We're certainly moving into some of that. And we would never call potassium a fungicide, but we certainly see a relationship between healthy or adequate potassium levels in soil and some disease abatement out there. Less disease severity, less disease problems. So this would be the time of year to apply potassium as we start moving into warm season grasses, slowing down as a response to environmental cues. We're getting less and less daylight out there, and soil temperatures are cooling as well. So this time of year, I think an analysis of a 1-to-1 NPK or a 1-to-2. And my guess is a 1-to-2 would make Dr. Martinez even more happy because of what he sees with potassium in relation to disease abatement or suppression out there on that. The other upside here is potassium is environmentally benign. So you can put it out and don't have to worry about it having adverse effects on either groundwater or surface water pollution or issues there. So potassium's okay, and we see far more benefits out of it. So if you need to put something out on warm season grasses right now, potassium's the thing. Tall fescue, as I said, our environmental conditions are changing. So our cool season species that we use in the Southeast is predominantly tall fescue. This is the time of year to be thinking about fertilizing it. So as we're coming into mid to latter part of September, that first nitrogen application on tall fescue for this year now is the appropriate time to be thinking about it. It's the right agronomic time to be putting it out. So back to those 4 R's, we're putting it out when the grass is actually growing. The root system can take it up, assimilate it back out, and that nitrogen can be efficiently used by the plant to generate and make more plants, greener grass, so on and so forth, that you're all rewarded for. I talked about analysis earlier. A 16-4/8 is an excellent analysis on tall fescue. Some of you are rolling your eyes. I know you're going, you can't find a 16-4/8. You're somewhat right. You can. But that last thing I have out there, or similar. So find one that's close to it. I know that there's one that's commercially available, at least it was a couple of years ago, of a 32-3/8. That's close enough on it. Obviously, this time of year, I would like to see a little more potassium in it, but that's your third number out there, that 8. But it's one that analysis-wise would use. Last couple slides, we talk about our soil chemistry, our pH. So we would use lime. Most of our soils in the Southeast are going to be more acidic. So we would use lime to raise that pH. Thing you have to remember is that pH moves slowly in soils, and lime is slow to act. Generally means about 3 to 4 months. So even some of these other products that claim to be faster, and I've tested some of them, and they are faster. But when you talk about a week to 10 days, yes, they are faster about a week to 10 days, but that's generally doesn't really make a huge difference out there. So we would want to take our soil samples now, get our data back, and then get our lime applied in, say, November or December for our warm season grasses, such that you give 3-4 months, we've changed and adjusted our soil pH, got it in our soil chemistry, got it into the right range to most efficiently use our nutrients. Next spring, as these grasses are coming out of dormancy, and you're starting to fertilize then. So N, the P, the K is going to be more efficiently used next growing season. So now is a good time. This fall would be a good time to take your samples, get those in, get the data back, and then make the adjustments that you need to make. Most of what we see out there in the industry app is pelletized dolomitic limestone. So we're applying calcium and magnesium to adjust that pH. I still think a soil test, whether you're in Georgia or Alabama or South Carolina or Florida, our soil test labs do an excellent job. And for the prices that you pay for these, are really relative. It's a good buy. Not only do you get phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, calcium, but in Georgia anyway, you get 2 pH tests. The first one is, do you need lime? So it's a yes or no. So we take the soil, pull an extract off of it, you test the pH, and that answers the question of whether you need lime or not. Is it too low, too high? Or if it's too low, then don't be lime. And then the next question you have to ask is how much. So the next test that they run then is a lime buffer capacity test, and that will actually generate how much lime you need to get within the appropriate range for adjusting that soil and getting your soil chemistry correct for most nutrient use efficiency next spring. This is the time of year for aerification and overseeding. So we're starting to see tall fescue lawns being aerified and seed going down. So it's the right time of year on these. I believe I've provided the handouts for these. I don't know if we can get these posted and folks can get these handouts down for their purposes, but this is the time of year and on those. And a thing to think about on overseeding or interseeding with tall fescue is this bottom bullet point down here. Are there any residual herbicides? Was there anything that was applied in, say, July or August? I have seen lawns where they've gone in and core aerated and interseeded and been sold a service and then didn't realize that another lawn care company that they were using put out a pre-emergent herbicide in, say, early to mid-August. Turns out those pre-emergent herbicides don't know whether it's a Poa annua seed or whether it's a crab or tall fescue seed. It works on both. Has there been anything sprayed and applied in the last 30, 60, or 90 days? And if so, then you may want to adjust your interseeding, overseeding, and interseeding plans on those. Likewise, any commercial lawn care folks that might be a new account or you're not in control of what's being sprayed or applied to the lawn, questions you might want to ask with those. With that, Shamat, I'm going to wrap up. If we've got some Q&A on here, I'll be more than happy to be available and answer any questions and that type of thing.
Yes. Basically, we got 3 questions at this moment. The first question is about, say, Bermuda grass mite. Basically, it just goes only on Bermuda grass mite. Bermuda grass only. It will not go any other grass species. Second question, there is a question about seeing some kind of symptoms in the grass where the bare spots is emerging. I would say, I don't know the answer to it, but I would suggest is that if you can send a photo to me or any of the speakers here, we can tackle that because I haven't seen that, honestly, anything like that before. Just going to the last question is more towards Clint. That is thoughts on liquid foliar versus granular fertilization programs.
Sure. As far as it goes with a liquid or foliar type of programs, they can be very much, they can be very effective. We've got some good products out there. I see a lot of commercial lawn care companies actually blending a little bit of both. They have some foliar feed. Turns out homeowners like to see that you've been there. So green grass and growing grass is a good indication that you're doing your job, but you tend to get greater longevity out of your granular products out there. Many times your liquid or foliars, or you're going at a lower rate. So you may be at 0.2, 0.3 of a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square foot. The growth response may be, say, 3 to 4 weeks on those, whereas a granular product, especially if you're using some of your slow release type of materials, those could be as much as, say, 6 to maybe 8 weeks. Most of the work that I've done, I'm comfortable with 6. Very seldom do I see them really extending out to a full 8 weeks. But as a result, many lawn care companies will do a little bit of blend of both.
Thank you so much, Clint. And also thanks to all of the speakers for the Turfgrass. Okay, I really appreciate it. And let's take a 1-minute break and move on to ornamentals. Okay, thank you.